everybody, and write on writers and read on readers, and welcome to the Tuber Book Club here on Books by Adrienne's platform. This is normally hosted by Adrienne Santiago, but I am your host for today. I'm Shannon, writing under the pen name of SC Houston, which I don't know if my name is showing up there or not, but I'll have to check in a second. I have my own channel under the name of SC Houston, where you can find me doing content about writing and self-publishing and running writing sprints. 1/3 of the podcast, self-publishing tips and tricks with Ben Pick from Writing to Write, who joins us today. And one half, and also with Morgan Lee, and one half of the AuthorTube Writing Conference, which is happening in a little more than a month, June 23rd through the 25th. So for the Tuber Book Club, we read and discuss, and discuss, and review books written by author tubers. And the book that we are doing today is Adrienne Santiago's debut novels, which is hence for me hosting today. And that is Mythic, Shadow of Spark. You can find it as a pinned comment. You can click on that if you want to get a copy of it. In a minute, I'm going to bring out the other panelists, and we'll discuss what we thought of the first 1/3 of the book. This is a rather big book, if you can see. It's really wide across, and it's quite. I think what Emma called it earlier, chonky, I think is what she said. So it is kind of a bigger book. So we're doing 1/3 this week, and we'll do another third in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, we will actually get a chance to talk with the author himself back here on his platform. So my overall thought to the book is that I feel like it's kind of a trend for the last few books that we've read, in which I feel like it took me a little bit to get going into the book. And I think this might be because the first couple chapters are really long, which the author said that quite a few times. He says, those first few chapters are really long, so it takes a little bit to get through those. But once I got through them, I actually have to say probably by the end of chapter 2, even though chapter 3 was a bit long too, I think by the end of chapter 2, I was hooked, and it really kept me in. Going for it. And so I'm enjoying the story quite a bit. There was one thing that's sort of like two things that kind of always happen together, but that annoyed me, which I'll talk about as we get through the chapters. Nothing big or huge for the story overall, though, because the story is great. I was really impressed with the blend of science fiction, crime, and mystery, and the fantasy elements. So I thought that was it's really well done. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the panelists, and they will do their intros. And we'll start with Bethany Vota. I can figure out how to make you big. There we go.
Hi, hello. My name is Bethany Vota, and I write short story collections. I have Scribbles and Scrawls out, and then the newly released Broken Wings and Buried Secrets. And I also have mystery thrillers. Well, this is the only one, but there's another one coming this summer. So that's me. I've had the privilege of knowing Adrienne for quite a while. And so we were sharing back and forth some of our work back when he was drafting. So I've read, I think, 4 different versions of the first 3 or 4 chapters of this story. So I'm really excited to dive into the final draft and get to know these characters better. And that's me.
Yay. All right. And we'll bring out Ben Pick next.
Hi, everyone. There we go. Hi, everyone. I am Ben Pick, and I post every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time questionable writing advice through writing metaphors on my YouTube channel called Running to Write. As Shannon mentioned, I'm also 1/3 of the self-publishing tips and tricks show, and I also am on the scripting the book. And this weekend we'll be doing, this Sunday at noon Eastern Time, we'll be doing our thoughts and comparison for Crazy Rich Asians between the book and the movie. And since Bethany brought out her books, I also have my own too. Here we got 2 books right here, Falling Through and Expanding Cracks. They are urban fantasies. They're a lot of fun. They kind of have whatever, we won't go there. But I was going to say they kind of have a similar feel to parts of this book, but this book that Adrienne has written is a mashup of multiple different genres, and we'll be diving into that too. I do want to say that I was an ARC reader for this book in addition to reading it now, so I can actually compare and contrast some of the differences and some of the last minute changes that Adrienne made, which I feel really improved the story.
And then we'll bring on our last panelist, which is the lovely Emma Bennett.
Hello, my name's Emma Bennett. I am a UK-based writer and I write contemporary romance and the occasional children's picture book. It's a little bit awkward because Adrian always forgets who I am. So this is basically my desperate attempt to make myself known to him. I won a copy of his book during his live stream, perhaps illegally because I did cheat a little bit. I must admit, this is definitely not my usual type of read, but that's one of the reasons that I was so happy to be included in this panel, because it really appealed to me. Once I got into it, I'm absolutely loving it. I did stop after the 8 chapters that we're going to discuss today, just so that I can make sure that we're only discussing that part of the book, but I'm really looking forward to finishing it as well.
And I think it's interesting how I read parts of an earlier version. And so some of that I read is not actually in here. But I also stopped at chapter 8. So I'm right there with you, Emma, because I like to try to make predictions and I don't want to know ahead of time. So it'll be interesting to kind of compare that with what all the different versions that Bethany saw. And then, of course, then Ben has read the latest version all the way through as well. So I did forget to ask you guys, let me know what are your overall thoughts about the book. So if you guys want to do that, I'll go through and throw up hellos to everybody in the chat. We can start with Bethy. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. So overall thought, yeah, I think we all have like the general consensus that I think we all prefer shorter chapters. So it did feel like we were just getting a lot of information right off the bat with like the world and the characters, but it was also pretty easy to fall into it because of the voice of Miggs especially, and then like very distinct voices of the other 3 characters. I mean, thus far, we only have 3 POVs. I don't know if that's going to change or not. But all 3 characters feel very distinct to me, so I didn't feel like I was getting lost in that, which was really great. And yeah, I'd say about by chapter 3, chapter 4, I was like for sure in it. I did think it was a strong first chapter, but the pacing felt a little slow. So that was that.
Okay. As for me, I really like this book. Like I said before, this is a merging of multiple different genres, which can be very difficult. You have the science fiction aspects. You had the magic, which is a lot stronger in this book earlier on. And you also have the murder mystery crime drama of it all. And Adrian did a really great job of blending all 3 of those together in a way which is interesting and makes me curious about how they will all combine and intersect. And as Bethany mentioned, the character voices are incredibly strong. I happen to also like the first chapter very, very much. I think there was a post in the comments about who your favorite narrator was, and yeah, for me, Migdalia is definitely up there. I do want to slightly go off on a tangent here, but this book came out, I want to say, on the 30th of April, and I feel like, Adrian, you missed out on a great opportunity had you have published it 10 days earlier. And that's all I'll say on that.
I don't know where that comes from, but yes, there was a poll that asked which one was our favorite character. And so I think that is interesting. So yeah, Emma, if you want to go ahead and let us know your overall thoughts, and then let us know who is your favorite so far. And then Bethany, maybe you can chime in with yours favorite afterward.
Sure. So I went into this book thinking, okay, sci-fi from the cover and the little bit that I knew about it, completely thrown into this absolutely different world, and yeah, just completely submerged into it straight away, which was a bit like, okay, like let's breathe, let's kind of try to take everything in, because there's so much going on in the first chapter. But I kind of love that because I couldn't pull myself away. I was really like, all right, let's get this sorted out. What's happening? Who's who? What gadgets are there? What is going on in this world? And I was really pulled into it and loved it. Although I have to say that it was when Faye came into it with her kind of auras and stuff like that, that's when I was really, really gripped, because I'm definitely more of a fantasy girl than a sci-fi girl. And romance, obviously, with what I write, is my primary things. I'm hoping for a bit more romance later on, but I don't know, fingers crossed. But yeah, Faye definitely for me is my favorite narrator.
Yeah, I couldn't decide on a favorite one. I mean, Migdalia, she's got a very strong voice, but when we got to Lear, I really liked what he had going on. But then Faye kind of did steal the spotlight for me. But I think I'm just gonna have to default to Migdalia because it's so clear she's got so much control over the stories that I can't help but wait to like get back to see what she's doing. So
I get now what Ben said about 10 days earlier, 420. Now I was like, oh, okay. So it's that actual date. I was thinking it had something to do with a name or something. But my favorite was Faye as well. To me, Migdalia, Migs, she is the least strongest character to me. So that actually, her having the very first chapter of the book kind of threw it off for me because I couldn't get into her characters. Like I was pulled in that first couple pages. I was pulled into what was going on, what she went through in her life. Things. She was sober. Like she broke her being sober for 364 days. That kind of stuff. I kind of like that background, but then it doesn't play into anything later. Like you don't see any of that come in later.
I feel like she's the character that really drives the plot, which is great. You need that. But I really like Faye and what she brought to the background of like that, like overall whole type of character. I feel like Migdalia is very like plot driven while we get both like character and plot driven with Faye. But I have to say, I love how all of the characters so early on interact and intersect. Yes. I think that's great.
I put those down as my points, like, hey, they met each other, yay. Alrighty, so let's move into, so hopefully we didn't give too many spoilers there because we're definitely going to move into spoiler area, now discussing each chapter as we go through. Does this look better or does that look better? Probably with that, huh? Probably looks better like that. So, I can't remember how you did it. So, name a book, discuss the book, chapter 1. Okay, so I wrote like a little script for myself so I could stay on track. So far the book, and I think the same thing what you said, Bethany, so far the book seems to have 3 main characters. If you read the blurb, there's 3 main characters. Migs kind of seems like the dominant character with Faye and Lear being the secondary. But as I was going through and I was making notes and kind of marking the characters, there's a 4th point of view. We have Cyrena. So, and actually, I mean, we do have the one chapter where it seems like it's both Mitch and Cyrena, but more Mitch. And then we have Cyrena's point of view. So, but she doesn't feel like a main character like the other 3. They feel like they're the ones driving everything. And so in the first chapter, of course, we get to meet Migs, as we said before. And, we have this, we get a little bit of her background. And I didn't feel like it really played into much later. So I think I would have been good. It picked the book. I feel the book maybe could have started in a different place. It could have started later, like her coming to the crime scene and people are saying, oh, you just got your promotion. Like everything that we learned before that, I don't know how it informs on the plot. It could be that I'm not far enough along in the book to see how it informs the plot.
No, I love that it started there, and that was, and she's finding out that she's become detective inspector, and then she's going on to the first
spent on it and I don't know how, like her being new, how does that, and how she became the new person, how does that change anything, this story?
Because that was her life before, and now she's been thrown into this new life, and you get to see how she lives, and it's an opportunity to see the world and how it works and things like that without you trying to deal with that at the same time as a murder investigation. So I kind of like that.
So there were some other great things as well. As like I liked the introduction to the drug of choice for this world. I like some of the words that were used, like cloud scraper instead of skyscraper. Interesting lore about what happened. We get very, very quick. I think it's just 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs where we find out why this is no longer a story that takes place on Earth and where we're at. And that was really well done. Lots of scientific gadgets and stuff. Oh, that was really cool. Of course, then we get introduced to the crime scene, which is to me the catalyst for the book, not her getting promoted. It's the crime scene to me. It's what is the main thing that starts everything. I think that the chapter ends in a good place. I do find the other characters more compelling. Okay, so the one thing that annoys me, and I start writing this at the top of every page this happened, and it's 2 things, but they go together, is that there's a lot of does, like proper capitalization of the, it's a proper name, the something, and the something, like I start writing this down, are very generic. The sun, the burrows, the saloon, the boss, the inn, the palace, the box. So it goes on. So it just goes through all the chapters. There's lots of those. That started annoying me because I'm like, I wanted something more like the spark to me. That was another capitalized the, but it made it its own unique thing for the science fiction book, for this genre. Everything else, I felt like there's so much imagination in the scientific gadgets and everything. I was like, I would want more than just, the saloon. So I don't know. That was kind of my thought. But
Well,
yeah.
Well, and just as like an editor, like capitalizing the often just kind of draws the eye unnecessarily, and it can be fatiguing. So I understand where you're coming from with that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna pass it off to you guys. You guys tell me what you liked and what your thoughts are about the chapter.
I want to hear Emma's thoughts. Take it away, girl.
Oh, okay. I really liked where it started, actually. I loved being kind of thrown into her world. And I mean, I know that she's like, if I remember correctly, she's like waking up, which I know is problematic sometimes. Some people don't like, waking up and at the beginning of a book, but I really liked it. You got to see her world, what it was like, and then this change that happened to her, and learning all about the tech and the world as it is. One thing that I found that I struggled with was kind of the drug usage, and it just felt very old-fashioned. You had this world that is so technologically advanced, and they've got, the special specs that they wear that can see people's blood pressure and heart rate and things like that. And then really you've still got people like rolling up marijuana. It just, I don't know, it just felt a little wrong to me, that part of it. And I don't know why. That really might just be me, but yeah, it just seemed old-fashioned.
But it wasn't illegal, was it? It was just
no, it wasn't. It was illegal. I just kind of felt that humanity would have moved on from that somehow. It just seemed very old-fashioned, the actual rolling up in a lot of cases. So
Do you want to go, Ben, or should I?
Yeah, sure. I can go. Sorry, I'm also typing in chat. So I liked the start of the book. We kind of mentioned how the start was a little bit slow, but it is still improvement. I felt that it was smoother. I felt that he did condense it down. And most importantly, I know there's some people in the comments who are saying that they loved the prologue, but he took out the prologue and moved it into its own separate short story as kind of a promotional material for this book. And I do think that was the right decision.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely, yes.
I read the prologue too, so yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. So the prologue, it gets us very well into the mindset of this world and all the goings on and all the drug use and all the flying around in cars. But there's also a lot of that happens in the first book. And I don't feel that, for those of you who haven't read the prologue, it's all about Bella, her death. Sorry, we don't find out her name until a couple chapters in, but we will eventually get there in this episode. But we find out the name of the person who died at the start of chapter 1, the trigger for this entire book. And we find out her story, what she was doing, who she was interacting with on her last day in this world. And I feel that the book is better served by having us learn that as it happens, or as the detective and as the other characters also come to understand that themselves. So I think that was a good choice. I think that it really smoothed over a lot. And I also feel that there's just a random formatting thing in that with the page breaks and the chapter openings, I really liked how the words, the words on the page are kind of capitalized to make them pop a little bit more. I think that is a unique formatting thing that I don't often see. So I just wanted to comment that I like that and how the book looks visually. This also does feel like our world, for better or worse. There's some moments of it's not really sexual misconduct, but it's comments about how there's some old detective who harasses some of the younger people, and unfortunately, what is in the future, what is old will always be the same. Everything old is new again, or whatever the phrase is. So it's good to see that this world is very similar to our own, so we can kind of draw our own connections between now and then, now and what will be, even though it is clearly far into the future. And Shannon, you mentioned that there's a paragraph in there about what the spark is. I like that because I don't remember it being as strong in the original version, or in the version that I read. Yeah. So it's much clearer about, hey, we're in these spaceships that are lifeboats, and we couldn't get where we were going, so we just combined them all into what is now the spark. So yeah, I think this was a really strong chapter 1.
Yeah, and like first chapters, as we're all authors, we understand how difficult it is to just nail that. So I can see the pros and cons of starting, with her waking up, because we really got a sense of the world and what Migdalia was kind of going through. But I agree with Shannon, like there really wasn't a ton of payoff with that. And to be totally clear, like if that is going to impact her character later, I'm going to need a refresher because it was a little bit forgettable. But I really did appreciate viewing the world, the spark, through Migdalia's eyes. And I think that was important to have. And I'm glad we had that. World building wise, I don't have like a ton to say other than like it's a big world. And I appreciate that we got information as it was relevant to us. Yeah. Like he didn't just say she got this piece of technology and this and this and this. It was as she was using it for the first time or whatnot, or trying to get used to it, we were learning what it did and what it does. There are sometimes in some of the other perspectives that I kind of forget where we're at. Like, I think just a few more sensory details every once in a while might have helped draw me in just a tad. Because like when we were in Lear's perspective, I almost found myself imagining Chris Kenny's book because it was similar, like bounty hunter, futuristic. And I had trouble differentiating between that. But also, like Ben said, he was also very clear of like, this is a futuristic society, but all of the problems that we have here are still there because we're human and we're flawed and we can't create this utopia. So it does allow for that distance between characters to be cut in half. Like you can be right there. And again, with what Ben was saying, with taking out the prologue and discovering what happened to Bella as the characters find out, it really brings us along with the characters versus like watching from a distance. And I think that was a really good craft choice. I don't have a ton of complaints about the first chapter. And I think part of it is just my own personal preference of I like fast-paced chapters, but I really didn't have a complaint overall with the longer chapters in the beginning. It was worth noting.
Yeah, I totally agree with that I liked having that all the sensory detail as viewed or not seen as experienced by Migs. And I remember going back to that first chapter, like, how would I change this if I was writing it? Because I did feel like it was not in the right place. But I was like, but all of these like lines that give us clues to the world, how would I get that in there if I changed this to a different place? So I can definitely see what like, I really want to keep this. So I don't want to get rid of this scene because I want to keep how this sensory details are coming through to the reader. So I could definitely see, like you said, it's hard. I think first chapters are very hard because we're trying to get the reader in. Yeah. So
then I feel like if you didn't have it, I don't know. I feel like if we started sooner, then we would have got a lot more like world building, like shoved down our throat because it's important.
We would have, yeah.
I don't think there was a great way of doing it other than like the way that Adrian chose. I think he executed well. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in chapter 2, we moved into Lear, who is one of the other main characters. He is our male protagonist, and he is a bounty hunter. So I think it's really, I enjoyed being his viewpoint. I think I enjoyed some of his later chapter. I think we only had 2 chapters in his viewpoint. I liked the second chapter better after he started interacting with like Migs, because then we got Migs's, like what he felt about Migs. We got more characterization of Migs through his viewpoint, which I really enjoyed. But in this one, we learned that he has a sister. He's a bounty hunter. He had a job he just finished up for a boss, which is called The Boss. And I'm sorry, Adrian, I'm gonna have to pick on you on that because there's a lot of does and common names. So I think this chapter went much faster. It was quicker pace. I think I stopped marking anything. The only thing I think I marked throughout this chapter were just like, there were some grammar issues. And there was one word that had a British spelling throughout all of this, where nothing else was Britishly spelled. But if you want,
at least you got one in. If you can do the
rest. So
this book, what is edited by Richard Holiday?
Yeah.
One page edited by Richard.
Yes. It's actually a word that I used to use the spelling of, and then my very last mentor in my master's program, he was an editor for a magazine and journal in the US, and he's like, you got to change all these. I had 300 pages worth of writing that I had to go through, and of course that's where I found out the Control F function, but before then I didn't know.
That is brutal.
Yes. And I was like, I have to change all these. He said, yes, that's British spelling. You don't do that here. We're in the US. I was like, oh, okay.
Sure, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
That's mean.
But yeah. And he didn't even tell me how to do it. But Yeah, but I thought this was interesting. We learned about speedum, which is am I saying the right word? Speedum for the drug.
Yeah.
Is that in this world, we actually get to see some signs of the drug and what that looks like when people are using it. So I thought that was really cool. More cool gadgets, of course. And then we end up finding out that Paleo is a person of interest, which carries on into the next chapter with Miggs, which is pretty cool because that it starts tying the storylines together. Ends up in jail and gets a job from a politician, which we haven't seen the payoff yet from that job from the politician. So I'm waiting for that. But we'll see what happens. Yeah. Otherwise, I didn't have any major issues. Just the grammar issues, some inconsistencies. I've marked those. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. And then the setup of the politician that we don't have a payoff with that yet. I don't know what that's going to lead to. That may or may not be an issue if we get something from that later. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I really liked this chapter. I did find that Lear's voice in this chapter versus Lear's voice later on was very different in the sense that he was still in high stress situations for both of them, but the way he talked and was very dismissive to the politician that was coming to, spoiler, bail him out. And the way he talked with Migdalia was, I don't know, the voice just was different. I don't think it was bad, but it kind of threw me off for a second. Other than that, I really liked it. I feel like there were some missed opportunities for some more world building, but overall, I flew through his perspective, and I really appreciated that, I don't know, already established in this world kind of occupation. I no complaints. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like this chapter too. And one fun thing between this and the ARC version, there was a specific reference to Bye to Mommy's Ghost, which we find out later is Lear's uncle who sort of set him on this path. And in the previous version, I don't think that reference was in here yet. We just find out later on that, oh, this is my uncle. His name is Tamami. But here in this version, we get a reference, a little seed planted in. So we get this Bye to Mommy's Ghost, and we don't understand that reference, but it gives importance to that name for when we do later on get to that person and their backstory. So I think that was just a really, really small detail, which made the published version much, much stronger and better in terms of world building. So it's just really a small detail that I liked. I also like that we get a taste of Lear's traumatic past, although we'll get much, much more into it. So again, it's just these tiny little hints that are baked in early on in the story, which will be great payoffs. And I'm not going to comment on some of your comments about whether or not there are payoffs. I will say that I like the romantic tension between Migdalia and Lear. That was there's already this initial spark between them. And so
she's not in this one yet, though. She's not in chapter 2 yet.
Oh, sorry. I must be reading
a little bit further on.
Lear's next meeting with her. Sorry.
Yeah.
Then I'll wait to say that. But I did like how the chapter ends because Luce, Harley, Lear's sister, says Luce ends, they'll kill ya. And that is I feel like that's a very, very strong ending to the chapter because it brings it gets us to keep those words in there, and it might, get us to remember them later on.
I wrote foreshadowing in the book there. I was like, this must be coming back. I do think, to point to that, both of the chapters so far, and I think a couple of them do this, they end really well. They end in good places.
Yeah.
And I will say, before we move on, just before I lose it, I'm really excited to see what happens with Lear's job offer from the politician, and the fact that the politician was kind of down in the slums sort of thing. I think that's going to be really interesting. Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, no, I was loving the little hints that were dropped about kind of the past and things. I'm really looking forward to that being built on. I agree with Bethany as well. I was drawn into this chapter completely, and I wrote it, and then I did think, was there some missed opportunities here? Because there was so much world building in the first chapter, which there had to be. We've discussed that. It is, with this kind of book, there's just so much that needs to be set out so quickly. It can be problematic. I kind of feel that there would have been nice to have had a little bit more in this one, and it was maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. But having said that, it's only because I was reading this, kind of analyzing it as I was reading it, that I noticed that. I think if I'd just been reading it as, a fun book, maybe I wouldn't have picked up on that so much. I was just carried away with the story.
I did forget to mention, because I didn't write this down in my notes, but one thing I thought that was really good was I'm on the paperback version, page 38. There's some backstory between Lear and Vandersey, and it's all done through dialogue. We were giving it through dialogue, and it's done really well. I thought that was really cool. I enjoyed that when I saw that. This was the chapter, though, that had the most "thes" with a common name. So this is the one that had the saloon, the boss, the inn, the palace, the box. So there was a lot in this chapter.
I will say, though, this chapter gave us an introduction of like what the future action scenes are going to be like. And I really liked the way that he wrote that and played that out on the page. So I think we're going to get some strong action sequences in the future. So it was fun to taste that for a half a page.
I would say that. Like, I agree with you when you said it that, Lear's voice was a bit different than when he's with Miggs, right? It seems like a totally different in dialogue. It seems very different, but in action, it's very similar. And this does set you up for that. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, chapter 3, we meet the third main character, which is Faye. This is the only chapter that did not have a capitalized "the" with a common name that was also capitalized.
Shannon!
Sorry, I just started sticking out to me. I was like, okay, fine. I can understand if you want to say "the" something, you want to make them both capitalized, but come up with something unique, not "boss."
Let it go. Let it go.
Well, it's important for the author.
We all have our thing.
Where he didn't have anything like that, so I don't know. But no, I did. I like this chapter. This was probably until I got to chapter 4. This was my favorite chapter so far because
until I got to chapter 4, it was my favorite chapter.
You too. Okay, yeah. So I loved meeting Faye. I loved getting that, and maybe because I do have a fantasy background, I love that fantasy kind of like vibe. And well, yeah, it's magic because she sees auras and she reads things from people because she sees auras. I didn't really write much down. I said again, pull through most of this chapter without issues, and we get to see Miggs. We finally get to we see interaction between some of these characters. We see Faye interact with Miggs. They meet each other. For me, the story really picks up by the end of this chapter. I kind of felt it picked up by the end of chapter 2, but here, this is where I have to say I did put the book down in chapter 2. I was done. I was like, okay, I can't make any more right now, so I got to put it down. And then when I came back to it and picked it up and I got to chapter 3, and by the time I got to the end of chapter 3, I was like, okay, I'm not putting this down again. I like this. And I didn't put it down. I finished it after chapter, once I started in chapter 3. So again, there were some inconsistencies with a few things. Some of it was just like, let's see if I can remember. I know I wrote it down. I didn't point out the other inconsistencies, but they were just small things like a red light flares. And once, I think this is like last chapter maybe, or maybe it's this one, where it says that her aura swirled with red energy, and then two sentences later it says the blue dropped out, leaving only the bright red. And I was like, well, where did the blue come in? Because it was already red. So that was it's just inconsistent. I mean, I'm trying to find something to say to make this better. That's the only thing I found.
Yeah, I loved this chapter. I loved the internal voice and internal monologue that we got from Faye. I think it was really strong and it set it apart from Migdalia's POV. I love that we got to analyze Migdalia from an outside perspective. This whole chapter was really strong. And although the shop wasn't described, I have a vivid picture in my head what it looks like, just by the selling incense and just her general vibe. I don't know. I think this was really well done. And I think that, again, I love when we have a multi-POV book and the plots are very different, but they intersect and they interact with each other early on. Because I hate when we read, I don't hate. Sometimes it's hard to get into a book when you're reading different perspectives and they're very one-sided until halfway through, and you're like, oh, it feels like I'm reading 3 little novellas, and then eventually they become a book. But we don't get that here. We get a lot of interesting interactions early on. No complaints. I flew through this chapter, and this made me really, really enjoy Faye, and I want more from her.
Yeah, me too.
I really like Faye's narration style as well. I think she's an interesting character who we don't often get to be one of the main characters. And I really enjoyed how not only does she see auras, but she actually casts a spell, which immediately early on in this book is merging the fantasy and science fiction elements in a way which I found to be unique. And I really appreciated having that early on. So instead of just getting, she can see auras, it's more of, hey, she can actually do useful magic in this world. And I know that this is I have this one comment here, but I know this is written in a story universe where we're doing interplanetary travel and there's all kinds of other elements, but I still had a hard time reconciling with the idea of synthetic tobacco without the harmful side effects. That was something explicitly called out. And yeah, so I wanted to call out here. So I really like the chapter, just that one nitpick, and I was anxious to keep reading on and to see how the rest of the characters are going to intersect.
Yeah, I loved Faye. This felt quite different from the first two chapters. And then when the magic was introduced, I was like, ooh, okay. I did not expect this. This was a whole element. I didn't expect when she helps the woman who comes in by giving her by putting the little spell on her, and when her mum comes in and is speaking to her and everything. I enjoyed the whole 8 chapters, but definitely not my usual kind of read. Faye and this chapter was much more me. So I felt I bonded more with this chapter, for want of a better way to put it. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this.
So I think it's important to note, we've got 3 chapters, 3 points of views, 3 different characters, and 3 very well-written different characters. We have a very different feel for each of them, which I think is really well done. So, and I do think part of it is kind of goes to what Bethany was saying, even though we didn't know everything about the shop, we could imagine what it looked like. And I think it's because of these small sensory details that were placed here and there that made it specific to Faye and her point of view. And just one that I found was where she said the hemp placemats made a creaking sound under the weight of the plates that usually made Faye smile. And that is such a opposite to how Miggs viewed her environment when we had her chapter in the first chapter. So I was like, yeah, these small details, they really added to the point of view and made each one feel different in their way. So I really appreciated that. Did any of you guys, and I think this becomes, I think it was right about here. So I thought, I think these names are meaning something. And it really, really hit home. And so after I finished reading the 8 chapters, I went and looked up all the names. And I think it's really telling. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure, I feel almost 100% sure that Adrian had to pick the names for a certain reason. Now, I think with the 3 main characters, there's not as much as that's told by their names. Like Migdalia just means tower. From Lear's point of view, we get this idea that she is like a goddess, he views her as kind of like a goddess, and that's a later chapter. And Lear just means from the sea, but it's a god in the Welsh mythology. But Faye means faith and belief, which kind of goes along with her character. And there's a lot when it comes to Cyrena and her name and some of these other side characters. Mitch, I know I wrote his down, hold on. One who resembles God. Ooh. Which is big because I caught something right in the beginning of that chapter that we get to. Now that's chapter 5. So we got another chapter to go through before we talk about it. But there was something I picked up from that. And then when I saw his name meaning, I was like, he's doing this on purpose. It has to be on purpose. Because of the symbol, whatever you say, the symbols there, the things that you see, and what happens. So anyways, I just thought that was interesting. I've started looking at the rest of the names and they all have something with them. Which I'll talk about the ones I found as we get to those chapters, meet those characters, but it's pretty interesting. All right, we move into chapter 4. And Lear is my favorite character so far. Don't hate. He's definitely.
I can understand that. Yeah.
No hating.
Yeah. I like Faye the best, and then I would go to Lear, and then I would go to Miggs. She's my least favorite of the 3, but I like her. There's nothing about her I don't like. I just feel the character more strongly with Faye and Lear. I get more sense of who they are. So I don't know. Okay, chapter 4, we're back with Miggs. She's putting clues together. She is very smart in the way she kind of looks at her scene. We kind of actually get this in her first chapter too. The way she kind of, she wears the deck specs constantly, even without a dead person around, because that way she could see. Oops, unalive. I should have said unalive. Sorry. I don't want Adrian to get kicked off here. But she does it to monitor heart rates and stuff like that. See if someone's heart rates or their blood pressure or whatever is, that might be telling a lie or they're getting anxious or something. So she's pretty smart with that. This is where she has a lot of interaction with Lear. She meets Lear. I think there's some funny lines. I marked some different ones. It's page 73. It says powerful line because they're talking about cyborgs and that there aren't any really cyborgs left. And the AI robots. Something about it being a racial slur. They call them Borg as a racial slur. And so they left. And then she thinks it's no wonder they left when the proper word for your people and the racial slur are the same. There's no escaping oppression. And I just thought that was a really powerful line. There's a lot in here. There's a car chasing scene with Lear. There's an extraction from a car while it's in motion. I think there's wonderful dialogue between Lear and Migdalia. So I really, really love their interaction and how you could feel the sexual tension. I felt it in this chapter. So we learn more about Lear's background. Again, more funny dialogue. And then Migs does find some more information clues for the ongoing case and the murder that we get, which I'll let you guys talk about a little bit more. I think I don't think I wrote down for like something that kind of hit me, which I think we've a couple of us have said something about other things here, is that the fact that the vaporizer pin, which is a clue, it has to be plugged into a socket in the wall. And I'm feeling that at this point in the future, there are no sockets in the walls because we have some technology now where we can charge things up without having a socket or plugging things in anywhere. So even Tesla he said he'd made energy that one day we wouldn't need like electrical poles. If we figured out how to harness it, we could just walk in our house and that would, generate electricity for our homes and stuff like that. So anyways, I feel like having read a lot of Tesla stuff, because I loved a lot of that stuff, I don't think that we would have sockets in the future. Anyways, that's my thought.
Yeah, piggybacking off that a little bit, again, with the world building and stuff, there's sometimes some stuff where it's like we've got these futuristic, lenses over your eyes that you can, see the, inner workings of someone. And I loved like Migdalia's like little bit of like the moral question when she was like analyzing one of the like beat cops. She was like, I shouldn't be doing this. But yet we see she didn't take him out when she was interviewing suspects or witnesses or whatever. So love that. But then with the world building, like there are sometimes like phrases, very common phrases that like pop in that like make me think like it's real world happening today. But then we like refer to like Earth this time as like ancient Earth. And so, yeah, there were some times where it would just throw me off, or like the use of like jumping in the water and saying cannonball. I'm like, wouldn't that like term be obsolete? But then later we see that they have like cannons in the car. I'm like, of all of the technology, why keep that? And so just some questions, but it's like also giving me a sense that like this is extremely like an extremely developed society. Yet there are still some major problems and pitfalls. And so I would love to explore that more, kind of like what is it, like the fifth element or whatever kind of thing, where it's like futuristic, but still kind of grungy, sci-fi, punkish type thing. So I'm still getting a sense of the world. As for this next chapter, no complaints. I thought it was interesting. I liked what all of information we got. Again, no complaints about the action scenes. I think that they're really well thought out. Definitely giving me inspiration and lessons for my future work. So yeah, well done.
Cool. Yeah, I liked how in this chapter we start seeing some more of Adrian's influences. So there was a passcode in there, and I didn't write down what the actual passcode was, but it reminded me of an old school one, which I happen to just have locked up in my head, which was up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start. Yeah. And I know it's slightly different. I looked up what Adrian used, and I couldn't find what it was a passcode for anything. So I don't know if it was just some random close to code, but
you're trying to break into Adrian's stuff with that password?
No, it's an old video. Yes, I am.
Oh.
I'm trying to take over this account itself. No, so it's an old video game code, and I was trying to figure out what it was for, because it's like a different one that's pretty common, but I couldn't figure out what game Adrian might have been referencing or anything like that. I also like that we're starting to get more of the mystery with the glyph, and I had less of a problem with the whole socket thing, because I can take the word socket as a bunch of different things, but it's also, this was basically a USB port too. So it's like a USB/charger/ a bunch of different things. So I just kind of assumed he was plugging it into any kind of wall. It doesn't necessarily need to be quite like our modern outlets. It could be whatever we want to imagine it in the future. So I kind of envision that as more futuristic than just our modern day things.
That's fair. Sorry.
I agree with Ben. I didn't have a problem with the sockets or anything. I just kind of, I don't know, I just passed by that in my mind. There's futuristic sockets. It's a USB, whatever. It didn't bother me. I really enjoyed the car chase. I thought that was really good. And I won't give away what happens at the end of the car chase, but it came as a surprise. It was good. It was like, oh, okay, like Sugar Plum Fairy, what's going to happen now? And it really made me want to carry on with it. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, seeing these two characters come together and their interactions. I didn't get as much flirting, I have to say.
I agree.
But then, I am strong on the romance. So maybe it just wasn't strong enough for me. I wasn't picking up on the subtle vibes.
I think it was from him and not her. She was very professional.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was kind of thinking it was maybe like an angle for him to kind of like, like Playboyish style type thing.
Yeah,
but
exactly. That's what because he's very kind of playful and teasing with everybody, even like, the boss.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh yeah, whatever, do that. Very, very teasy. So I kind of just got that vibe from it as well.
Maybe I'm viewing it from later chapters. Just kind of.
That's true. I did get a little bit more later on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you in this chapter? I'm not trying to read too far ahead. And trying not to remember what I had already read. Yeah. When we learn about the Erdmans, which is our victim, we have two victims in the beginning of the book, and it's a male and a female who are related. And we find out one is Mitch, and his last name is Newman. So again, the names have a meaning, new man, right?
Loved that. That was awesome.
Yeah. So we found out he's actually an Erdman, which is from a family who lives on a farm. They're kind of called like a cult by some people and things like that. And I really got like strong, like, not from the cult part, but I got strong like Amish vibes
mm-hmm.
from them talking, the way they talked about the family in this. And then of course we do get to meet the family. I did see that there was one typo. We have the ARCs, right? ARKs, and it was ARC once in this chapter instead of ARK. There's also the guy, both capitalized. But yeah.
Not gonna let that one go.
All right, so we move to chapter 5, and this one kind of threw me for a loop. What was I supposed to say something?
No, you're just cute. You carry on.
Yeah.
One thing I did think was really, really gross when she's got the gloves on at the crime scene and she like touches the blood to analyze it. I was like, ew, like, and then do you just make sure you use a different finger for each victim if there's like lots of them?
That is a forensic question. I
just thought that was really gross. There was just something about that made me go, oh no.
All right. And to note, this was my favorite chapter out of all of these. Although I liked chapter 5, but it was different. Chapter 5 was different because we're not in the viewpoint of any of our three main characters. And I would say at points, it was not always strictly in Mitch's point of view. Sorry. I do think this was meant to be from Mitch's point of view. So we have Mitch and Cyrena, but there are times where Mitch is commenting on like or the point of view character is commenting on like on his own looks and stuff. And so just kind of, I thought, was this Cyrena? And then later on, because I did review this chapter after reading all 8 chapters, I went back through and reviewed. And I think there's a drone that's following them, which we kind of get an idea that there's a social media like kind of like stuff. It's not called social media, but I remember I wrote, it was in chapter 1. They talked about something. I said, oh, this is social media for the future. So there's a drone following them. And we know with Cyrena later that there's a drone that follows her. So I don't know if this was her drone or his drone, but he's the one that's messing around with the drone at the beginning of the chapter, and he gets it flying and gets it following them. But anyways, we go to, we don't know where we're at in this chapter. We go to a new place, and by the second page, was it the second page? I think it was the second page with the fourth. It's second like full like back and forth page. Like so it's the fourth page. It's page 98. I wrote here, I have Adam and Eve vibes, and then on the next page I got Adam and Eve again, and then just a couple of paragraphs later it says snake-like creature coming from a tree.
Mhm.
Just because they're at a tree, they get a fruit. She gets a fruit. She takes a bite of it. She offers it to him. I'm like, oh, is the snake gonna come? I actually wrote that the very first time I had Adam and Eve vibes. This is now picking fruit. Snake next? Question mark. But and of course, then we find out that Mitch's name means wait, I have it written down. Where is it? Right. Here it is. Means one who resembles God. And Cyrena means enchanter. But then, of course, we find out what her real name means later, and that is even more telling, I think.
Mhm.
But again, enchanter would go along with the idea of Eve, who's supposedly enchanted, convinced Adam to eat of the fruit of the tree, right? So anyways, I got strong vibes. This was really different. This chapter was really, really different in what we've experienced. We're on a different world. They see the spark from where they're at because they notice it in the sky, whoever's point of view that we're in, which is confusing for later because I think they said that the video was from, and this is a video that's being seen, but we don't know it's a video. This has happened in the past. They said it was New Gaia, or they said it was Gaia, not New Gaia. It was Gaia. And I was like, well, how can it be Gaia? Is it New Gaia? I was a bit confused on that part. But at this point, we don't know where they're at other than there's the line that they can see the spark. And the Oriole, I don't know how you say that. Borealis. Am I saying that right?
I don't know.
I think so.
I remember that.
But, the lights that you see if you're in the North Pole.
Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, the
So they
aurora,
see
aurora
that, which
borealis.
did put me in the mind frame of Earth when I read that. But then they said they saw the spark in the sky. So I was like, okay, well, maybe they're on the planet because I think there was a planet that was talked about that was New Gaia. Is what they called it. So what else did I write here? There's a curious line on page 100. What did I write? Oh, they were running, and it said neither one of them were winded. So, before I got to the end and I moved on further into the chapters, I thought, well, is this a dream then? Or did they eat some magic? Was the fruit magic? Or is it that there's extra oxygen in the air? Or
That's
what's
where my
going on?
mind went. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, why are they winded? But even if there's extra oxygen in the air, you'd still be probably a bit winded if you're running a long ways. So I don't know. I didn't quite get that one. But yeah, other than that, so I wasn't sure on the point of view. There were some grammar issues and repetition of a line of a word smeared, but it's just small things. Yeah. What did you guys think of this chapter? Oh, and this is where we have a first sex scene too. I don't know if it's the only one.
Yeah, I was like, that's Adrian. Adrian sex scene.
No,
disturbed.
I liked this chapter, and I think that Adrian pulled a bold move, deciding to make it its own POV, and it's essentially like where the characters, Migdalia and Lear, watching this video that they tried so hard to find. And I think it was better told this way than like if it was told through the eyes of the other characters. So again, it cuts back on that distance between the characters. Because it's a very different format. I feel like he has some freedom with, third person limited versus not. So all the other characters are third person limited, but this one wasn't because we kind of switched back between Cyrena and Mitch. It didn't really catch me off guard, but it was also like, oh, interesting. So, and then I liked kind of like follow up to the very next chapter. It was the characters like reactions to seeing it. So just like our reactions of like, what is this? What's going on? So I thought it was interesting. I don't have a ton of opinions on this world yet. I think the more we get to learn about it, I might have more. But right now I'm just like, this is very interesting and unknown. And apparently it's unknown to our main characters. So at least I'm with them with where they're at. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I liked how Adrian wears his influences on his sleeve. There was an "It's alive" comment that was just sort of thrown out there, which, again, I don't know how valid that would be in whatever year they're in now, but we as readers kind of get that and appreciate it. So I thought that was really fun. I did like how Adrian throws in an intimate scene and then immediately, well, shortly thereafter, jumps right into, hey, they're running for their lives from a serial killer. So there's this really interesting, very, very fast shift between the two moments that kind of feel like they're somewhat related in the way it's written. So I thought that was really good. It kept the tension going, and
but I don't think it was a serial killer. We didn't know it's a serial killer at this point, but I did write in here serial killer vibes as well. So,
right. Sorry,
yeah.
my notes don't really have too much context in them, but within this section, we do find out that there's all the other pictures of the victims. So yeah, I thought that was in this chapter where we saw, because she sits
pictures,
down. Yeah,
and she, but they don't know that that's what it is. They never say serial killer. She just says these are his trophies. He sits here and he looks at his trophies, which is like, okay, that's serial killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. Sorry. So that was my own interpretation of that. And as for your questions about it, so I think that there were a couple of justifications for it. So my understanding is that the Spark is the network of spaceships that are all tied together into where they're living, and then there's like the planet itself. So they're on the planet looking up at the Spark, which is the spaceships and not the planet that they're on, Gaia versus New Gaia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got the feeling that the fruit that they ate kind of has some supernatural elements to it. So that's how they were able to run without getting winded, or at least that's how I interpreted it. And I'm sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You tell me.
I thought the same thing. What you said about that, I thought they were probably on New Gaia, but then the next chapter, when they're talking about where the location is or whatever it says, they said it was like it's been 300 years since anyone's been there or something like that. I'm trying to remember the exact words, but and I was like, well, wasn't it 300 years ago when they came here? Or that's why I was. I don't know. Maybe I'm crossing facts here, but that's kind of, there was something there that made me think, but I thought that was New Gaia, not Gaia or whatever, the Earth. Yeah.
I don't remember the specifics, but and I do need to head out very, very shortly, but I did want to say one thing about chapter 7. So there's a section where Serena mentions that there's a 5-second delay, and in my head there's just warning bells are going off.
Yes.
So yeah, everything else is kind of
What was your favorite chapter, Ben?
I honestly, chapter 6. I really like the meeting of the heroes. The fight scene was incredible, and it felt very real and visceral. So,
okay. All right, you want to do your outro?
Okay. I'm Ben Pick. You can find me Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Writing to Write on YouTube. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week and discussing chapters 9 through
25, I think.
9 through 25. Perfect. Thank you.
No, thanks for coming, Ben.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Ben.
Bye, Ben.
Have fun at work. Sorry you have to leave.
It happens. See you.
All right, Emma, what about your thoughts?
So I love the feel of this chapter. I love that it was very different to what we'd seen before. I mean, I know you've got the drone following them, but it felt much less kind of sci-fi. It felt much more like they were out in the wild. I was very concerned about them running naked. Being very practical myself, I was very anxious that they picked up their clothes at some point. So I was very grateful when that happened. That could have gone either way. So I was very glad that Adrian remembered to do that. But yeah, this was great, and it didn't stop the action for me. And that sometimes I think when there's such a bold move to a completely different feel to a chapter, it can make it feel like the action of the book is stopping, but this didn't do that for me. It was just a different feel, and then we head back to kind of the sci-fi world that we're in. I thought that they were still on New Gaia, and that they were looking at where everybody lives. I didn't think it was a different planet, but maybe I got that wrong.
Well, Adrian does say here that it was shortened to just Gaia. It was Gaia. It was New Gaia. Okay, so because humans are lazy and unimaginative. Oh, that must be the reason why, for like the boss, the saloon, the guy, the everything. Just kidding. Okay, I don't know why and I did think it was that they were on the planet there where Spark is at. So now it makes me curious, like, what happened and why aren't they living on the planet? Were they still living on the Spark? Why aren't they on the planet? And they said,
sorry, mute.
I guess, and they said something about that wasn't habitable or something. I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see if there's anything more said about that. The Spark is essentially a man-made moon for Gaia, which has rings but no moons of its own. Yeah, I did get that. And I think this was interesting what Martin said, where he says, I think the sex scene would have worked better if there had been earlier moments in the book to set that up, that the book would go there. So, yeah, and maybe.
Yeah. Potentially. I think as far as sex scenes go, like it was pretty tame, all things considered, but it was just kind of like, oh, we're going there. And it felt like a very emotive and passionate thing, like both physical and intimate. And it kind of threw me off guard because we didn't really know these characters very well at all. So I was like, oh, we're getting so many emotions all at once. But I feel like that's going to have something to do. I think we're going to get a payoff for that. But it definitely kind of was like, oh, okay, here we are.
I kind of thought that because knowing that Mitch is dead. And of course, at the end of this chapter, I'm like, well, is Serena still alive? Where is she at? What is she doing? Is she pregnant? Is this the reason why we need to know about this sex scene?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my mind went with the, thinking a payoff, or maybe just something that passed between them, whether it was words or not. I don't know. Something that she found out from him that would be important.
So I will say, like, so far, Adrian's been very, like, specific. So going back to chapter 1, we noticed Migdalia was looking at the crime scene and she casually mentioned the vape pen stuck in the computer. We later get the idea like, oh, this is really important. And I think because it's such a long book, we're going to get payoffs for everything that he specifically mentions, but the challenge will be helping the reader recall that.
Yeah,
so again, I feel like we're going to get something from it. It's just as it matters, is it going to be as powerful? And that just comes down to how Adrian writes it and presents it. And I have high hopes. So.
All right. Well, we'll move into chapter 6. So now we're with Lear, Miggs, Banderas, right? Who's the one that opened the video file. And we realize that they're the ones who watch the video and they talk about the video. They're the ones that label as serial killer. And then Lear, this was a really great chapter. This is where Lear and his sister Harley, they take out the boss and everybody that works for him, basically. And we do find out there's a second video with the pyramid, which I think is the gateway for how they got to where they were going. And see, that's another thing that threw me off, though, because they talked about going to the pyramid as it was on Earth. But they didn't go to our Earth. They went to New Gaia. So does New Gaia have the same pyramid that we had on our Earth? Is it another replica, or did they just take it from our Earth and move it to this one?
I thought it was a replica.
They had a replica in the museum, but they had a real one somewhere else.
Oh. Yeah, I did think it was a little strange that they were able to still be doing Egyptology from where they were. That seemed a bit excessive. Like if you were escaping Earth, I wouldn't be worrying about bringing pyramids with me or stuff like that.
And then Bandera says that's got to be Central Park and some special effects. Well, did they have a Central Park then on New Gaia? Did they build? Was New Gaia just a replica of the old Earth? Because I was like, okay, this is giving me vibes that this is all they actually went to the old Earth, like Central Park, and then in the pyramid. So I don't know. And I probably have to read it again just to see if I could maybe tease out what it was that's tripping my brain to make me think that this is not.
I don't know if we have to have the answers right now either. I want the answers. Obviously, I'm an impatient person with things, but I feel like maybe we'll get more as the story progresses. At least I hope so. So yeah, but I understand. There were certain things where I was like, that doesn't quite make sense. But it also could make sense if it's presented differently in the future. So we'll see.
There were some inconsistencies with the capitalization, mostly with the boss, because the boss up to this point has been fully capitalized, the and the boss, and boss was capitalized, the first letters of each word. But in this chapter, it was often dropped for one or the other or both. So there's inconsistencies with that, some grammar issues. And then there was a comment on page 11 where Lear says, it says the angel in the park, and it's Lear thinking it, remembered it. And I feel like I missed something somewhere in... Actually, I forgot to ask you guys. Did you guys remember what does CC Day mean? This is something Miggs thinks about a few times, CC Day. And I'm like, I went back through, when I read back through the chapters again, I couldn't figure out what that meant.
I didn't think we'd been told yet. I thought it was just something was dropped and that we'd find out about it later on, because I don't remember actually being explained.
Same.
Okay. And then this one, the angel in the park, Lear remembered. And he was thinking about this when he's looking. This is where we get Lear's point of view of Miggs, and he says he hadn't seen such confidence in that like that in a woman's walk. And he talks about how, she carries real power with her versus the boss, which is why I like that her name means the tower, standing tall. So I kind of like that idea. But But he says like the angel in the park, basically. And I'm like, what angel in what park? Where was he at that he saw an angel in a park? And I don't remember where that came from. So I don't know if that was maybe from a previous draft. There was a reference to an angel in a park. I don't know. It kind of threw me. That one did, or I missed something. It's possibly I could miss something. Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts for this chapter? It was a really good chapter.
Yeah, I don't have many. Like I kind of, at this point I was flying through it, and then like after the fact kind of went through and tried to make some notes. So I really don't have any complaints.
Which is a sign that it's a really good story, isn't it? When you're knowing that you're wanting to think about it and you're wanting to analyze it and make notes, but you find that you're just flying through it. I really liked the fight scene. I thought that was well done. But because he had been drugged, I would have liked to have a reason why. I mean, so he's woozy, but he's still taking out like 5 or 6 guys, which seems unlikely. Like these are going to be big guys who are, trained to fight. So I was like, how is he still able to take them out? I would have just liked it that I don't know. I can't think of a way around it, but that there was a reason why he was still strong enough to take them all out.
There's something he says, and I don't remember where it's at and exactly what he says, but it was like some reference to like some type of fighting master that he had. So I just thought, he's just a bad A. I just took this. I didn't have an issue with that because I just thought, wow, he's just, like a John Wick,
Yeah, and I did like the mess that was made of the place, and when he just kind of walks downstairs and gets his sister and walks out, and then later on when the police arrive and they're like, what the hell? Like this is a complete mess. I really liked that. Yeah,
and I thought it was really smart how he did the smoke bomb and then shot twice at the floor to make the guys think there was shooting going on, so they were shooting at each other, but he was out of there.
Yeah, I think the action sequences and whatnot very strong and very easy to read, because sometimes action sequences very stop and go. You're like, what's happening? I don't get it, but we get the pacing. It's really great. So excited for more because I know we're going to get more.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember I didn't say any of this. I marked it in here, but the action sequence that was with Lear in the other chapter, there was a lot of passive voice use, which passive voice makes sentences longer, slows down the action. And I just kept thinking, wow, this action scene would be better without all this passive voice here. But this chapter didn't have any of it. So I feel like the writing definitely got stronger. It's just a lot of the Okay. All right. Chapter 7. I put 6 here twice. This one is in Cyrena's point of view, which, by the way, the one where it was Cyrena and Mitch was called The Grove, and The Grove ends up showing up somewhere later. It is also capitalized. The capitalized, Grove's capitalized.
Well, that's good. We know how you love the capitalized.
This one has the grid in it with the capitalized, although in the first chapter, the grid is talked about. The is not capitalized and grid is fully capitalized. All 4 letters are capitalized. So it's a inconsistency there. But but I like this one. We learn more about Cyrena. We learn that she is basically a social media influencer. She's a cam girl, which kind of
basically you.
Huh? No. Not me. I don't have sex on camera. She has sex on camera. That's part of being a cam girl. But I think it's interesting. Like, okay, so she meets someone, and guys, I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember anybody in the book up to this point being called silver haired?
No, I don't. I was trying to remember if that guy is important to Amen. Amen is his name, right?
Yeah. When I saw this silver hair, I was like, there was someone that was said that was with silver hair early in the book, and I looked and I couldn't find it.
I couldn't either. Yeah.
I was like, where is this?
It seemed like it was important, but I couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is somewhere. And I got the vibe that he might be the serial killer. That was my thought, is that he's a serial killer. And then after I looked up their names, his name, hold on. Where did I write it down? So his name is Amen. Where's it at? I know I wrote this down somewhere.
We've got a comment from Adrian
Here we go.
Saying there is one silver-haired man mentioned prior to this. Y'all missed it.
Let's see, like that's the double-edged sword of such a big book. Like,
when I read it, I was like, there is another silver-haired man in here somewhere. I just couldn't find it again. Because I was like, when I read that, I was like, he's been here already. He's been in the story somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, so Aemon means the hidden one. And he gives his last name, which I didn't write down, but it means hidden, forgotten. Okay. So that's his name. And of course, then Cyrena gives her real name, which is Zanami. I don't know how you say it. Amaterasu. It's I think both of them are Japanese names, and they mean she who invites, and her last name means great divinity. When I saw Amaterasu, I see a lot of. I've read Japanese mythology books. I was like, that's a goddess. I think that's a goddess or something. That's something major. So I was like, that's actually when I read her name, I was like, all these names mean something. That was the first. I had already thought about it, especially with Newman when he explained New Man.
Yeah.
I wonder if he picks his names on purpose. And when that came up, I was like, there's something here. There is something here. So maybe her eating the fruit, maybe it did give them powers in some way or something. I don't know. And so she becomes a goddess. But and by the way, so the main Migs, right? Migdalia just means tower, but her middle name, which is Amara, we find that out with where Lear takes out his boss. We found out her middle name, and that means firm. I thought that was interesting. Anyways, I'm liking all these names.
Yeah,
all of my names mean something in my stories. They're all chosen for a very specific purpose. So that's something I always do. So we find out that Cyrena is her name on the grid. And she spends a day with this guy, and he goes around with her. So I like the chapter. What did I write? There were some grammar issues and inconsistencies. That's the only thing that I wrote that I didn't like. And she hangs out with Aemon, who I suspect is the serial killer. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, my only thought was like, I don't really have a concept of time of when this happened. Like, is it soon after the Grove?
Yeah, I wrote that question. Like, does she know that he's dead?
Yeah, so like that's where I was at, where I was like, is this a flashback? Because everything else is very like sequential. So like that was my thing, and I think we're not really supposed to know, and we'll figure that out as we go. But because of that, I wasn't like super invested in it. Like it was a shorter chapter, so I think that helped with the pacing. But this didn't really stand out to me in any way. I think as we learn more about her, I'll care a little bit more, but. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, it was a short chapter. It was quite different. And again, I like that. I like the way that the feel of it kind of changes between chapters. It was interesting. Yeah, I wondered whether we weren't supposed to know exactly when it takes place, or whether
it's after, because she says like on Gaia all over again.
Yeah, I knew that. Right. I just didn't know if it was like days, weeks, years.
Yeah.
And then it kind of would have been nice to have had a date at the beginning of the chapter, but I don't know whether that will spoil things later on, or whether it was done on purpose. It was quite interesting to see their kind of social media thing with her being followed around and everything being like the 5 seconds delay and stuff. Yeah, it was cool.
Okay, I cheated. Real quick, I looked up on my Kindle silver hair. I found it. Adrian, I found it. It's in chapter 2. It's in chapter 2 in Lear's chapter when he's talking with the boss, and it says like from a few yards away, Lear watched a man he didn't recognize leave the boss's office, wave at Tony, and head towards the stair. The man was around Lear's age with shining silver hair.
Okay, I know I read it somewhere. Yes. That's why I wrote it in here. I was like, same man from earlier, and I was like, wait, what man? And so I went back and I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find it.
And that was it. Pretty much the only like information we get is like about his hair and about him leaving, and Lear just kind of like in a trance by him, and then someone like pulling him out of it. Then he goes on about his business. But I found it, Adrian. Okay.
So as we all missed it when we were reading this carefully, maybe a slightly bigger clue.
Yeah.
An arrow.
I didn't miss it. I just couldn't find it again. I knew that I knew the silver hair had popped in before. I just didn't know where, which point of view,
Mhm.
because we do get a lot of world building in those first few chapters. So there's just so much to try to pay attention to.
Oh, sure. But if this is something that's kind of being leading on and this is kind of important to it, that maybe, I mean, I don't know how, but maybe just like practically an arrow going to it, like this is
maybe
important.
some sort of interaction or something.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah. A little
But we
something
don't
else
know if it's
that
important.
It might not be. Yeah.
We
It
don't
might
know.
not be.
But I found it.
You found it.
Get that mwahaha smugness out of here, Adrian.
Yeah.
eBooks for the win, because my paperback is still not here.
Oh yeah, I ended up canceling my order with Amazon and just bought it from Barnes & Noble. It was like $3 more. But I was like, I want it.
Yeah.
All right, so the last chapter covers chapter 8. This is the third chapter that we have in Meg's point of view. Miggs goes out to the Erdmann's I don't know, location. What do you call that? Estate. Yeah, estate. It's well guarded. She is in a carriage where she can't see where they're heading after she gets through gates. And she tries to what she's trying to do is actually make the connection between the dead people and the Erdmanns, that they're for sure that they know who they are, that they're related, and release the bodies and stuff. And she didn't quite get everything that she needed because they wouldn't give a blood sample, and they're not on file anywhere. So, this one, I like this one. I didn't have a whole lot that I wrote, other than there's, you have some more does, but you have like the big house, right? Is it that? No, maybe I wrote that for something else. I don't know. I wrote it somewhere, but there's also a point where it feels like it slips out of her. Yeah, the barn. That's what it is. You have the barn. But it slips out of her point of view, I feel like, when it talks about her red streaks in her irises that flare up with the Emperor's glow. So I don't know. I mean, I like to write limited third person. You don't have to be limited. You could just be third person. It's a different name. I don't remember what it is, but limited or close third person. Yeah. If you're limited or third close person, then the character is not going to see their own eye color or hair color in most cases, or things like that. But there is another third person where it's not limited, and I think that's what this kind of slips into most of the time. Did I write anything else? I mean, we have the saloon again, but then we have the Old West Saloon, and then it goes back and forth, and we haven't had the Old West Saloon. So at first I wondered, was this the same place or is this a different place? There's two saloons, but I think it was meant to be the same after reading it through a couple times, but it was called two different names.
Yeah, I picked that up too, but I didn't really change the story, but it was like, I can't really tell where we're at with that.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, and I thought it was funny at the end.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting that they let Migdalia in, but they took all of her like technology and stuff away except for her like pew pew. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and I think Adrian did a great job of like building up this like religious sect cult that is not above the law, but also like kind of, and they position themselves in a way that they can be, but it's clear that there's like a bigger meaning behind it. And so yeah, I liked it. I think we got a lot more information, and I think we're going to get some more sinister stuff happening from them in the future.
Yeah, and I loved the idea of this kind of estate alongside all the futuristic stuff that we've seen, and where the detective herself lives in particular. When you look at that, and then you look at this very old-fashioned farmhouse it's set up as almost like a relic, isn't it? Exactly as it would have been hundreds of years ago back on Earth. So I really like that. And when she's in there and she's looking around and seeing like the milk jugs lined up and things like that, and how different it is to the rest of the world. That was very clever.
And again, I kind of got like the Amish vibes, kind of like feeling from it, but more sinister, a lot more sinister. Yeah, and I think this chapter where it ends is like, okay, I don't know if I felt like I got a whole lot, but I did feel like there were certain clues I was supposed to get from this, but then that they're going to definitely pay off later. But it wasn't, I guess, I like the chapter. I think after the action scene, it just felt like, wait, no, I want more of that.
Yeah.
So
And I was almost kind of ready for it. The fact that she
Yeah.
got to keep her, you know, weapon with her and whatnot. I don't know, but yeah, it was good.
I really like the change of feel of it, going from all the action and then to kind
Yeah.
of just more
I think it's
observation.
needed,
It's clever.
for sure. I just
Little
was so much
breather.
into the action scene. I was like, I want to see more of this.
You like the fighting.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Any last comments from the chat here? Explains the reader. Okay, yeah, I know. We said that already. Pyramids. Adrian's been watching History Channel. Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. Same thing. Angel in the Park. Okay, so pyramids, Angel in the Park, CC Day, and more all will be revealed down the line. I can wait for like the Angel in the Park and the pyramids and CC Day. It's just the way I feel the way it was included. Or maybe it needed more info. Like not info what it is, but like when he says it was like the Angel in the Park. And the way it's put the way it was put into the story, it made me feel like it was something I was supposed to know already. And that's where I was.
And I think part of that is because of the POV with Migdalia, especially, is we're discovering everything along with her, and you kind of feel like a partner with her, and you know what she knows, like you know how the technology works because it's new to her too, and you know her reaction to the video of like the new planet with Mitch and Cyrena. It's your reaction, it mirrors hers because it's new. So I understand where you're coming from with that. Yeah.
And maybe that makes sense too with the CC Day, because of the fact that we're learning everything through her. When she says CC Day, I'm like, well, I should be learning what this is through you, because you've been teaching me what all these things are already. Now you're keeping something from me. It feels disingenuous because I feel like I've learned all the stuff I need to be learning as the story goes, but now she's holding this piece of information back from me.
I didn't feel like it came across that way. I feel like it's one of those things like, okay, I hope it's a big payoff, or like I will get to learn it. So it didn't really distract me, but I understand where you're coming from.
I'd have to say of all these, the CC Day distracted me because it was mentioned more than once. It was several times it was mentioned.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
And I was like,
I quite like that. I felt it was kind of leading me like, don't forget that this is going to be important. And I was like, okay, I won't forget, as opposed to the man with the gray hair who I forgot.
Maybe you just have more patience.
That's true. I feel like, I mean, there's a million ways that you can go about like writing an epic fantasy / sci-fi / thriller mystery. And it's, you know, I've read books where they like really do help you and describe everything right away. And then my biggest complaint is, the pacing felt really slow. And it's because they spent so much time with me, helping me along. But then now we're like, the pacing's really great with this. But that's probably because he doesn't spend so much time teaching us. So it's like, you can't win it all. Like it's hard.
Well, I know I'm definitely looking forward to continuing. And maybe that's probably why I felt a little down from reading that last chapter. So it's like, we had great chapter scene with all this action. Okay, we got a good break scene. Okay, let's get to the next. Wait, no, I got to stop here.
Yeah. And I'm with you too, because I have to stop. Otherwise, like I will, my reaction to the first 8 chapters would have been influenced by the extra chapters that I read. And so I wanted to be, you know, genuine with like my reaction to the first 8, but I was with you because I was like, I could have read another chapter or two.
Yes, definitely. All right. Well, in 2 weeks from today, we're going to be discussing chapters 9 through 25. And I'm definitely excited to read more of this. So we're going to say goodbye. I'll let you guys do your outros. We'll do first up with Emma. If you want to do your outro.
Hello, my name is Emma Bennett, and I'm a UK-based writer, and I write contemporary romances like The One That Got Away. I also write the occasional children's picture book, and I have a YouTube channel which I've had for just over a year now. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out now, please do. It's full of all kinds of writers, tips and tricks, and author life vlogs, and lots of live streams, and we have a lot of fun over there. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yay. And the wonderful Votasum.
Hello, my name is Bethany Vota. I also have an AuthorTube channel where I post extremely irregularly. You'll probably find me floating through AuthorTube, hopping on other people's streams, just because that's what I like to do. I write short story collections, Scribbles and Scrawls. That one's kind of creepy. Broken Wings, Buried Secrets, a little bittersweet. And then I have a thriller tracker. And yeah, I'm excited to see you all in 2 weeks, and discuss what else happens.
Sorry, I'm like trying to. So yes, there is. We talked about it a little bit. The prologue and other things that you can find about this world and this story if you sign up to Adrian's newsletter. I just dropped the link into the chat there. If you sign up, you can get the book that comes out before this, which is just like a short story length, novella, maybe somewhere in between.
It's like a longish short story novella. It's interesting. It'll really help you build the world too.
Well, and I'm Shannon, and I have my own YouTube channel, SC Houston, where you can find me there doing lots of things. But you'll also find me here in 2 weeks doing the hosting for the next Tuber Book Club on the next part of Adrian's channel. And I need to hit the right buttons here.
I'm so glad you're the one in charge, because I'm so bad with technology.
So I'll sign off with what Adrian says. Writers write on, and we are out. Bye. Nope, wrong button.